Hello, welcome to a complete tour of the western side of Apple Valley, Minnesota. Apple Valley is a southern suburb of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, and in this video we're going to be taking a complete tour past the schools, parks, and several neighborhoods of Apple Valley. So stay tuned and come along for the ride. All right, we are starting this tour from Pennock Avenue and McAndrews Road. McAndrews Road is kind of a thoroughfare on the north side of Apple Valley. We're going to get onto McAndrews and get onto Highway 77, also known as Cedar Avenue. And the reason we're doing that, that's going to take us directly into the heart of Apple Valley, where we're going to get to see the commercial areas and the businesses and the retail. But this is where Apple Valley started from. Is a two-lane road, Cedar Avenue, that went over a two-lane wooden bridge over the Minnesota River. And I, as a little kid, actually remember going over that bridge. Part of that bridge is now taken down. It was a swing bridge, so the barges could go by. Half that bridge is now gone, but the other bridge, wooden plank bridge, has now been turned into kind of a bike path that gets you into the Minnesota Valley Wildlife Preserve. But this is the entrance into Apple Valley. Right now we're about 10 minutes from the airport, about 10 minutes from the Mall of America. We are not going to be on busy roads the whole time, mainly neighborhoods, but as we're looking into the city coming down this hill, you get kind of a good view of what we're going to see as we get down into the denser areas of Apple Valley. Again, we are now on Highway 77, Cedar Avenue, headed south into the heart of Apple Valley. It's about 4:30 near the end of May in 2021. It's a beautiful day, a little chillier than it ought to be. It's in the 60s when I think the high temperature right now should be around 74, but it still is a beautiful day for a drive. So we're now at the intersection of 140th Street, which runs east to west, pretty much all the way from Burnsville to Rosemount. And we're going to be crossing this intersection, and we are just coming in to kind of the main heart of downtown Apple Valley. And when we get there, I'll be walking you through some of the old locations and businesses where the city of Apple Valley actually started. And nowadays we've got everything that you would expect: restaurants, Walmart, Target, lots of fast food places, fitness centers, etc. But this city generally grew up in the late 60s into the early 70s. Originally known as Lebanon Township was the township that we were in. And sometime around the late 60s, early 70s, they adopted the name Apple Valley, and that's when they started building all the subdivisions. And we're actually going to be starting out, the first neighborhood we see is going to be one of the original subdivisions in Apple Valley, just south of County Road 42, and you'll actually be able to get a look at the, I guess, architectural styles in the neighborhoods, how they built up from the original Apple Valley subdivisions into some of the nicer and more expensive neighborhoods over time. And in fact, when we end the tour, we're going to be in one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the South Metro, and we'll actually be looking at driving right by the house that was the most expensive home ever to sell in the city of Apple Valley. So again, this used to be just a two-lane road, and now it's 3 lanes in each direction with turn lanes. But we are getting pretty much right to the downtown heart of it. We're going to drive by some of the older commercial buildings, some of the newer commercial buildings, and then we're going to get into the neighborhoods. Just past 145th Street, and we're going to be heading west on 147th into kind of old Apple Valley. So taking a right, heading west on 147th Street in Apple Valley. So this was almost the original strip looking forward. There's a famous Dave's restaurant. There's an office building that used to be the, can't remember, like the Apple Valley Tennis and Racket Club. And actually in high school we would go there in the mornings for our tennis and racket class, and I actually play racquetball inside, which was kind of cool. You'd get to school, hop on a bus, and head down to the racket club for an hour and a half. Not that we're all fancy, but that was just one of the electives, and it was kind of a fun thing to do. So this place is called Times Square, and it's one of the original shopping areas in Apple Valley, which is why I kind of chose to start here. As we pull along the right-hand side, you're going to see over to the right the Apple Valley Municipal Liquor Store. This is an add-on to this original building, and our one and only grocery store, which used to be Piggly Wiggly, and then it became Penny's, and then Hauser's, was right in this mall. We had a Snyder Brothers drugstore, a coast-to-coast hardware store, and right on this corner is where the grocery store used to be. Another hardware store, and the laundromat. Some other areas were in this strip mall to the right, all kind of this light colored brick. Valley Bike and Ski has been a fixture of Apple Valley ever since I was a little kid. They used to sell Schwinn bicycles. I imagine they still do. On the other side of this intersection with Pennock is the Walmart. And if you're looking at me, back to the right, we've got an Ace Hardware over my shoulder. Ace Hardware and a couple other, like a printing shop, but that used to be the downtown Apple Valley roller rink, known as Apple Rollerway, and their logo was a caterpillar with a bunch of skates, really cute. They changed to the Big Apple at some point in the 80s, and then they finally shut down for good in the mid 80s. But our South Metro area here in Burnsville, we still do have a roller rink that kind of, I guess, the clientele probably consolidated with in Burnsville, called Skateville. So now we're sitting at the intersection of Pennock, about to cross Highway 42 or County Road 42. And this County Road 42 and 77 are kind of, like I was talking about, the heart of Apple Valley, where that was the big main intersection in town. And when I was a kid, probably the first stoplight was at County Road 42 and 77. Again, we called it Cedar Avenue. Basically 2 lanes one way, 2 lanes the other way. Houses and farms on County Road 42. Then we're going to be driving along to Apple Valley Square. And actually, if we make this light, I'm going to take you right onto 42. So we're actually going on to 42 through what I keep calling the heart and the center of Apple Valley. The place I called Apple Valley Square is right here. Used to be a Budget Power and another drugstore. But the intersection up ahead, as we head now east on County Road 42, is Cedar Avenue, and in the avoidance of sitting at another long light, let's just take a right and head south. And as we head south, you're going to be able to see the new Target, which started as a Target Greatland, and now it's actually undergoing some renovations. That's going to be on the east side of the street, just south of 42. And then our second big grocery store, which is now a fitness center on the west side of the road, used to be called Rainbow Foods, which is where I had one of my first jobs at. So right behind me, that's it. 42 and Cedar Avenue, heart of Apple Valley. So over to the left, that's where we have, you can kind of see behind the Mattress Firm and the defunct Baker Square is the old Target Greatland. There's a Best Buy over there and an Office Depot. This is the heart of the commercial area of Apple Valley. And I'm going to give you a little run through to the right, where we've got another little strip mall. All right, you'll see the Aldi Foods. And this is one of the older malls, strip malls in Apple Valley, built after that original Piggly Wiggly, but the Experience Fitness there, right in the middle of that building, was the second big grocery store we had. Rainbow Foods, now defunct, now a fitness center. But here, if you kind of look around, up ahead of us is that Cedar Avenue County Road 42 intersection, and to the right is where we saw the Best Buy and the Target. And let's take a little run through the parking lot here to give you an idea of what downtown Apple Valley looks like, and then we'll head into some neighborhoods. Friendly people. Friendlier people letting us right through. So if we kept driving straight through the stop sign, we're going to drive right into a Chipotle. But on the left-hand side, we are coming around the side of this old Apple Valley Square Mall. Used to actually be an interior mall, and now they closed off all the interior passages and just made it kind of a outside strip mall. So here's Half Price Books, used bookstore, which I love to go to. We've got a Joann Fabrics and a Savers, which is a kind of a thrift shop, used clothes, donate it. I think it's, I'm not sure if it's part of the Salvation Army, but some charity runs and manages it. So there's the Savers, and now we are about to get out of the commercial zone and start exploring some neighborhoods in Apple Valley. And as promised, we're starting with basically the original subdivision in Apple Valley. I'm not sure if it had a name at the time. I just call it Old Apple Valley now. And if you were to look on a map, it's not exactly concentric circles, but it's kind of laid out in a fashion where there's a park in the center and then these streets kind of go around. We're just passing, for instance, Jonathan Drive off of Pennock. We're going to take a right on Fireside. You see Old Apple Valley, this initial original subdivision, all the streets were named after apple varieties. The builder was Orrin Thompson, which I believe is like, I'm not sure, at least regionally, if not nationally, a known builder of just kind of modest suburban homes in the 60s and 70s, probably even the 80s. So you'll kind of get a look at what we've got going on here. Just generally, 1,500 to 2,400 square foot homes. These homes here were built in the late 60s and late 60s, maybe into the early 70s. And we'll take a right here on McIntosh, right? Oh no, we're actually not going to take, sorry. We're not going to go McIntosh. We're going to go to Oriole, and that's going to take us out of this subdivision where we're going to explore some other neighborhoods. So this right here is really a perfect view of the initial original subdivision home building in Apple Valley when it turned from Lebanon Township into Apple Valley. So in this neighborhood, and in a lot of the older neighborhoods in Apple Valley in the 70s and 80s, these homes were all generally like 5 to 6 different floor plans. They basically had 2 one-level, 2 Rambler styles, 2 to 3, or maybe just 2 split entry styles, There is a two-story, not a lot of the two stories in this neighborhood, and then some multi-level splits. So these homes are so old that they've been modified a lot. Like, you'll see homes that were originally one level now have a second story on them. Interestingly, at the time they were building these homes in the 60s, I'm not sure if I'd say half, maybe a little less than half of these homes had one-car garages, which I'm sure the zoning code doesn't even allow in Apple Valley, at least for single-family homes anymore, and hasn't for a long time. But kind of look over to the right, you'll see there's a detached garage, there's a one-car garage. Over to the right, this home was probably built with one car and it's been added on. So a lot of that has happened, but we're getting a good look at some one-car garage homes or some one-car garage or two-car garage additions that kind of give you an idea of what this area may have looked like when it started out, before everybody had, I want to say 2 cars, but now, 3 or more cars. Most of the homes that you're seeing now, at least in this part of the metro, are built with 3-car garages. So we're leaving Oriole Drive, we're going to pull out onto Grandview, and we're going to be heading past Westview Elementary School and Valley Middle, one of the now 3 middle schools in Apple Valley, and one of several middle schools, one of 3 middle schools and one of several elementary schools that are in the city. And I'm not sure, up the road we're going to be seeing a school called Westview in a little bit, but Westview and Southview Elementary probably built around the same time. I'm going to guess Southview is probably first, just because this is where the original homes were built. But these buildings are combined. So the part we're looking at right now is Valley Middle School. And they've got soccer fields and baseball fields and tennis courts out along the back. And we'll get a look as we go around. And then just as that building stops and this new one starts, this is Southview Elementary. Again, built in the 60s with this light colored brick. It's been added onto, but they kind of kept the look of it the same. We're taking a right onto Whitney Drive and we're going to be heading west. As we come around the corner, getting a look at the entrance to Southview Elementary School. And as we continue on, you'll get a look at kind of the vast playfields, the park, and the tennis courts and stuff that are all shared now between Valley Middle School and Southview. But when I was a kid and we had Little League Baseball, we played a lot of Little League Baseball games down here, and also soccer on the soccer fields back there. And as we leave, it's kind of nice to have the school right in the heart of the neighborhood, not even on a busy road. And as we do that, we are going to be heading straight now west into the sun, but we are, excuse me, tighten up the camera, I know it's getting a little bumpy. We're going to be taking a right on Redwood, heading north, and as we get further from that heart of downtown Apple Valley, we're getting into homes that were built in the early 70s as development kind of spread out from that initial development area. We're going to be heading north on Redwood, and we're going to stay on this across to the other side of County Road 42. So similar homes that we just saw in the older development, but then we start to add in a couple different styles, maybe some 2 stories here and there. And I believe for the most part, these homes were actually getting built with 2-car garages to start with. So kind of give you a look at these homes. We got just kind of the typical Apple Valley Rambler on the right. And we're going to be coming around a 4-level split on the right, and then one of the standard, so here's a 4-level split. And then next we've got one of the standard split entry styles and another Rambler. And this is the second type of split entry style. So again, the neighborhood, I mean, we're on Redwood Drive. I still call this kind of old Apple Valley, the original area. So now we're going to be coming up, heading north on Redwood Drive. We're going to be crossing County Road 42 and continuing into similar neighborhood just on the north side of 42, and we'll be coming out of that neighborhood to take a look at Westview Elementary and then Napa Valley High School. We got lucky there. Oftentimes you get to that intersection and there are just cars coming from Burnsville and Napa Valley, or cars coming from Napa Valley into Burnsville. We got lucky making that quick crossing. So one of the things you'll notice in pretty much most of the Napa Valley neighborhoods, since the majority, at least of the west side of Napa Valley, was built up, again, starting in the late 60s to the 70s to the 80s, one of the nice things is when they built all these neighborhoods, they cleared all the trees, whatever was here, and then they planted new ones. So now here we are 40, 50 years later, so all the trees that were just little nothings at the time these neighborhoods were built are now huge. Some of them actually have been taken down, they're so old, but we've still got like this nice canopy of trees in so many neighborhoods in Napa Valley. And we're going up a big hill. You'll notice we're going to see a lot of hills from now on. So we're still on Redwood. We're going to take a right on Walnut Lane. And the homes in this neighborhood, actually, since we've started getting into the neighborhoods in Old Napa Valley, they're generally selling now in late spring of 2021, generally between $250,000 and $350,000, and they go a little higher or a little lower depending on the condition and the style, but fairly consistent for these particular neighborhoods. And we're coming down Walnut Lane. We're going to be seeing the other side of Redwood Park, one of the original community centers. They've got an outdoor pool, at least at the time the only outdoor pool in Napa Valley, and one of the pools back in the 70s that had the high diving board, which you can kind of get a look at the pool from here. And they've since removed the high diving board, I'm sure for liability reasons, but I remember going up there as a kid and being very scared. But once you got up it, there's only one way down, and that's into the pool. So if you had the guts to climb up to that diving board and look down, there's only one way to get off that diving board. Otherwise you'd be ridiculed maybe for the rest of your life. So this, when I was about, I think 3 years old, we're on Elm Drive here. This is my very first neighborhood I lived in Napa Valley. And I was a little kid, and the house looks a lot different. I think, I'm embarrassed to say I'm not sure which one it is. Might have been this one. This is 252. I think it's 232 further up the street, but it would have been easier to see if they hadn't changed it. I think this might be it. 236. I think this is my old house. But it was much easier to remember when I was little, and the years passed, because it had a one-car garage, it was a bright yellow house, and it had 2 pine trees on either side of the driveway. And over the years, as I grew up and would have the occasion to come by this house, these trees got wider and wider, and at some point you could barely get between them to get to the garage. Eventually they took them down. We are taking left. We're going to be going north on Grandview, and somewhere in this neighborhood I do have a picture of the late Senator and Vice President Hubert Humphrey. When Napa Valley was a new suburb in the 70s, Hubert Humphrey would actually come and ride in the Napa Valley parade, so my dad took a snapshot of him that somewhere I still have. And we are now heading north on Grandview, and we're going to be coming up to Westview Elementary School, which is the school my brother went to, but not me, because we moved. And we're not going to be seeing that other house in this street that's on the east side of Napa Valley. So, pulling up around Westview Elementary here, you can see that light colored brick, very similar to Southview. These first 2 schools probably built almost at the same time. Now, when these schools, the elementary schools, were serving these neighborhoods, we didn't have a high school. So all the kids who lived in Napa Valley were getting bussed out to Rosemount, I believe, for high school, and that's where my brother had started school until they finished the Apple Valley High School, which we're going to be seeing in a minute, and they built that in 1979. But we're on 143rd Street headed back east. We're going to be pulling right up to the Apple Valley High School parking lot. And now Apple Valley is served by two schools. We've got the new Eastview Elementary, which, as you might guess, is on the east side of Apple Valley. That's new and that's nice, but the school district here in Apple Valley, District 196, that serves mainly Apple Valley and Rosemount and Eagan, very highly ranked. And at the time, and even still today, Apple Valley High School, which you're actually starting to see right in front of you, was one of the best schools in the metro, and thus one of the best schools in the state. So we're on Hayes Road. We're going to be heading north, and we'll be doing a little drive-by here of Apple Valley High School for you. It's been added on to over the years, but really nice school inside and out. Great teachers, at least when I went there. I graduated from that school in 1990, but you little get a glimpse in the back here of the softball and soccer fields. And when I was a kid, I was in the marching band, not the football team. But when we had football games, we would share the stadium at Rosemount High School, which Rosemount is further to the east. So we'd go there to play football or to march in the marching band. But probably about, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, they actually built Apple Valley its own stadium for the Apple Valley Eagles, and now it's a full stadium, bleachers on both sides in the back of the school. We're turning right and heading east on 140th Street, which is one of those original roads we had crossed, first stoplight we came to when we started the tour. We're going to be heading north on 137th Street, and let me give you a look at the backside of Apple Valley High School over here. Yoink. Neighborhood we're heading into now is called Palomino Woods. This is just kind of a little neighborhood that was built in the, I think, the 80s. I lived here for a little bit. This is the third Apple Valley house I lived at, but as a kid, it wasn't my house. I lived off of 137th Street, which I'd love to drive you by, but we're going to get a look at the park over here. Lots of parks in Apple Valley, and most parks have tennis courts. That's just the way they built them. But you get a look over here. It's a great park, literally like a block from my house. So I'll come here and play tennis over there, and we got a sand volleyball court. I never see anybody actually using the sand volleyball courts, but a lot of these parks have them. So there's the park, and Wildwood Park, I can't even remember the name. I had to take a look at the sign. But we are now heading into, sorry about that. We're now heading into, actually I'll take a little stop on the side of the road. We're heading into the Oaks of Apple Valley. So we're leaving Palomino Woods, again, Palomino Woods, 350 to 450 here in the spring of 2021, and we're going to go into one of the kind of more exclusive neighborhoods of Apple Valley. It's called the Oaks of Apple Valley. I think there's an Oaks 2, and now closer to Rosemount there's an addition, but a pretty extensive development that was built generally in the 80s into the 90s, and these homes are a lot bigger. The prices in the Oaks right now range from probably 500 to 800 with some 500,000 to 800,000, with some homes that are probably on the higher side of that and some on the lower side, but kind of, little getting into the more upscale homes of the city. And again, we're not there yet, but as we cross into the Oaks, we're going to see a lot of much different home styles than we've seen so far. But as we cross in there, I got one funny thing to show you. Up on the left, there's some type of, hopefully it'll be showing behind the trees, but there's something that has to do with like air navigation or communication. You should probably be able to see behind the trees over there. It's like a big white geodesic dome. And before this neighborhood was developed, there's probably some little road up here that went to service this thing. But we could see it because all these trees weren't grown up, so we could see it throughout Apple Valley because we're way up on a hill now. And you just see this thing sitting above the lower trees, and we always used to call it the Jolly Green Giant golf ball. But there it is, some type of, I don't know, beacon for the airport, navigation beacon. So we are now in the Oaks, and we're going to be heading off Harwell Path, going on to Gurney Path, just to give you a look of what these homes look like. Very nicely maintained neighborhood, a lot of custom homes out here, a lot of interesting styles, definitely not cookie cutter. And I imagine when they were building these, if the term McMansion had been around, maybe. But the nice thing is, you know, these are all fairly big lots, like a third to maybe a half acre. And most of these homes are, you know, quite different from each other. Some are bigger, some are smaller, some are stucco, some are one level, multi-level. We're turning left onto Guild Avenue right now. We're going to be heading back north through the Oaks. But again, we've got the full trees, and one of the nice things about this neighborhood is when they built it, they left a lot of the mature trees in here, so they didn't clear cut this and build just an ordinary subdivision. They took care to maintain some of these more mature trees, so it's always kind of had this feel. Now we're back to Harwell, and we're going to continue north on Harwell. In fact, when it comes to the trees, I'm starting to see, as we're trying to look around, a lot of these homes are kind of hidden by the trees. So maybe you're not getting as good as a look is I wish. Now the road we're on runs parallel to a more main road that runs to the neighborhood called Pennock Avenue. And literally on the other side of the block, over here on the other side of the homes that you're looking at, is the home that Vincent Kartheiser, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but Vincent Kartheiser, who played Pete Campbell in the Mad Men series, grew up like just a block over there. And I believe went to Apple Valley High School, but that's kind of interesting. And we've actually had some other celebrities. Chris Orr, who was in the Mighty Ducks movies and in various TV shows, including Sex and the City. I went to school at the same time he did. He grew up not too far from here, back in Palomino Woods neighborhood. So we're crossing Gunflint. Again, we are in the Oaks of Apple Valley. Homes here between $500,000 and $800,000. We let the jogger go by, so the guy back in his trailer in. Let me go. We're taking a left, kind of heading generally on a road called Havelock Trail, and we're going to be exiting the Oaks back into that neighborhood called Palomino Woods, and then we're going to be going to a different part of Apple Valley off Palomino Trail, and we're going to take a look at a couple other kind of higher end neighborhoods. On 35th Street. So back in Palomino Woods, these homes are generally $350,000 to $450,000, kind of traditional, one level, two-story, multi-level homes. But again, look at the tree coverage. It's just nice. One of the nice things about older neighborhoods. A lot of the newer developments out in the South Metro, Lakeville, especially in way southern Napa Valley, they're taking over the old, not concrete, but Napa Valley ready mix. It's not sure if you call it mining, but sand and gravel aggregate companies. So they had a bunch of, well, they still do, moving through Napa Valley. One of the original businesses out here was Napa Valley Ready Mix, and they dug out rocks and sand because basically all these hills are, I believe, glacial moraines that created all the topography in Napa Valley and all these hills and Heritage Hills and Palomino Hills. And they would dig that out to make concrete out of. But when we get back into this part, they just built houses on these hills. Okay, so we are at the end of Garden View, and we're going to be taking a right turn and heading east on Palomino Trail, which kind of was a main road through the northern part of Napa Valley until McAndrews Road came through. But now it's just kind of pleasant back here. 45-mile-per-hour speed limit, and it turns into 35 when we get closer to some houses. But walking paths on both sides, lots of walking paths in Napa Valley. And we're going to be turning right and heading into another development, Heritage Hills. And this is 131st Street, and we're heading into the neighborhood now. Similar kind of to the Oaks, but built probably more in the, I'm not sure I'd say late 70s, but probably in the 80s. And some extreme hills back here. Prices back here recently have been $350 to about $600, but a lot $350 to $500. But like, I'm not sure if you can get a sense of how hilly the terrain is back here as we go up and down. Like, check out this driveway over there. That's just crazy extreme driveway. And I believe some of the trees were left here, but a lot of the trees have grown up since the 80s, so it's really kind of a nice secluded feel back here. And a lot of these homes are more modest than what we saw in the Oaks. Again, the ones closer to the 350 range. So there are some split entry style homes here. Not everybody is, super fancy and custom, but there are a lot of custom homes back here too, and some well over 600,000 that were built. But again, now we're going up quite a steep grade. And as neat as this neighborhood is, not only would I not enjoy riding a bike up and down these hills, but just the locations of the houses you have to be conscious of when you're looking at homes back here. Maybe you don't think about it right away, but some of these driveways are so extreme that, number one, they're kind of a pain to get up and down, but even parking a car on it, or something like that last driveway we saw that kind of snakes around and is long just to get up to the top of the hill, kind of a pain to shovel. Also, if you're built into the side of a hill, you might not have a walkout basement. If you're built on the other side of the hill, you will have a walkout, but there are literally ravines on either side of the street here, this side especially right now. So you have a walkout basement, but maybe not much of a yard. It's just going to go into the trees and maybe a little pond or a little marsh down at the bottom of the hill. Again, this neighborhood is called Heritage Hills. I'm going to take it back past a really cool house. We're going into Lower Hamlet Court. Well, I guess all these houses are pretty cool, but these are probably closer to the above 600 homes that you'd see back here, but nice cul-de-sac, and they probably have more level yards. You see a lot see the green grass there where the trees aren't shading them too much. Kind of reminds you of the John Hughes movies from the 80s, this neighborhood right here, where they'd have the house parties, 16 candles, etc. I guess all that stuff was like Highland Park neighborhoods of Chicago, or I can't think of it, but north of Chicago is the neighborhood that those movies were filmed at, but kind of similar houses to that. We're gonna head out back onto Palomino, and we're gonna go back into the Palomino Hills neighborhood, which is a more modest kind of custom home neighborhood that was built in the 70s. So, heading west on Palomino Drive, we're gonna take a right onto Belmont and drive through Palomino Hills. We're now heading north on Belmont Road and entering the Palomino Hills development. And these homes, by today's standards, are fairly modest, but I remember growing up in Apple Valley, before Heritage Hills existed, before the Oaks existed, this was kind of the high-end development. And still, like you'll see, we've got split entries and ramblers, but these homes at the time were kind of fancy and a little more custom than what you'd see in the typical Orrin Thompson neighborhoods. And here's a great park. It's got a little bridge across the pond. There are ducks in the pond, and there's a tennis court back there and a playground, but it's all pretty overgrown with trees right now. Very leafy. Belmont Park. And now we're heading on to Chaparral Drive, which is gonna take us a good way deep into Palomino Hills, and we'll loop back around on a different road to exit. But right now you're getting a good view of Palomino Hills. Again, homes here generally 350,000 to 500,000 here in the late spring of 2021. So we don't have usually the super clean, like mid-century modern homes like the 60s. This is kind of more 70s, but a lot of these homes will have the dark wood, some natural stone, dark brick, overhangs, arches, maybe stucco walls on the inside, so they're kind of neat. Sometimes you go into a home back here and it feels like a time capsule from the 70s, and I'll just be honest, some of these homes with those original styles have held up better than others. So you don't hear a lot of people looking for shag carpeting, archways, and dark beams across the ceiling. But if you're looking for that type of home in Apple Valley, this is a neighborhood that you're likely to find it in. And some of these homes can be pretty neat. But you'll also notice that with the trees having grown in so much around these homes since they were built, you almost feel like you're living in a forest. The Palomino Hills as a subdivision doesn't have the cookie cutter quarter-acre lots. Some of these lots will be a half acre, some will be a quarter acre, and most are irregular, as you see kind of the curves and hills that we have back here. So we're gonna go on to Hidden Meadow, which is kind of the end of Chaparral. It loops back around. So we're taking a right onto Hidden Meadow. And here's an interesting road up on the right, Butte Avenue. And you'll see the road is closed right now, but this, I guess, is probably the steepest road grade in Apple Valley. And this road right here is closed in the winter months, like November through March, just because it would be too dangerous to try to get up after a snowfall. Not sure if you can see how steep it is, but it's quite steep. The reason it's closed right now is because up at the top, Cimarron Road, they're resurfacing that road and getting at all the plumbing and everything underneath. So I think the top end of that road is closed off, so it's unusable. Otherwise we'd go up it into another part of Palomino Hills, but right now you can't go up it because the road's closed. And that is the connector between the two sides of Palomino Hills. And the road up there is called Cimarron. But Palomino Hills, definitely hilly, so we're going up a hill right now, but I think this is a great neighborhood. You just have to be choosy about which house you pick. You gotta think of condition, you gotta think, sometimes you gotta think about drainage. These homes that are built in the sides of hills, you've got a steep hill coming right at the back of your house. Obviously it can lead to water intrusion. Now, one thing you probably can't hear is on the north side of the road around Chaparral, it runs parallel to Interstate 35E. And the funny thing is, when they built this neighborhood in the 70s, 35E didn't exist. So all the folks on this side of the road, or as you're looking that side of the road, they backed up to, you know, nature's wonderland. It was a forest back there. My older brother had a buddy who lived in one of these houses, and they both had, or the buddy had a mini bike, and there were just trails back there, and you can imagine how cool that would have been for a kid. You just go back into the woods, and there were miles of trails that I'm not sure who owned it at the time, or if the city or the Met Council had already purchased that land. Obviously they had planned 35E for a long time, but up until 35E was built, this was a quiet neighborhood built back into the woods. And at least on this side of Chaparral, and even kind of this side, opposite to where you see me talking, but there is road noise here on the north side of Palomino, especially off Chaparral, because if you stop the car and listen, and even got a park right here with a pond on the other side, there's a sound wall, but the noise from the freeway is quite noticeable. So another thing to consider back in this really cool neighborhood. You probably can't hear it as we're driving. We're leaving Chaparral and we are heading on to Sweetwater Drive, going up another big hill. Sweetwater is going to take us back to Belmont, and then we're going to head back to Palomino Drive and check out that most exclusive neighborhood with the highest price home ever to sell in Apple Valley. So if I haven't introduced myself yet, my name is Kevin Huntington. I'm the managing broker of the independent real estate firm Metro Home Connection Realty. And I'm in these neighborhoods all the time. I thought I should take a camera around and do some tours. And I'm hoping that if you are somebody who's considering relocating to the South Metro or from part of the current Metro, or if you're coming from out of state, I'm hoping that these tours will be helpful to you, because to me, you can read data and statistics on the websites and read about the school districts, but getting a nice first-hand look around the neighborhood and the neighborhood options, I think is helpful. So that's why I'm making these tours. If you're ever curious about real estate in the Twin Cities or here in the South Metro, you can always reach out to me. My contact information will be below the video, and whether you're thinking of buying now or sometime in the future, just curious, I love to talk about these areas. I've lived in the Twin Cities my whole life, so please don't hesitate to reach out if there's any questions or if there's anything I can help you with. So we are now heading on Palomino Drive, heading east, and we're going to be heading up into that exclusive neighborhood. And at least in the South Metro and the Twin Cities in general, we don't have a lot of gated communities. There's Bear Path and Eden Prairie, and North Oaks up by Venice Heights. But at least in the South Metro, we don't have any gated communities. So as we pull into this neighborhood, it's called Grandview Estates. These homes are all up above 1 million when they sell. It's not gated, so we're going to be able to drive right up there. And this, I think this neighborhood was built in the late 80s. Just used to kind of be empty wooded area. Interestingly, This neighborhood also backs up against Interstate 35E, but they're really up on a high hill. So from the homes that are backing up to 35E, there's a large distance between the back of the home and the freeway, and most of the homes on the north side of Grandview have skyline views. Minneapolis for sure, and sometimes I think Minneapolis and St. Paul, both skylines from the view of your mansion. So yeah, definitely if you want to live in Grandview Estates, for sure, let me know. Glad to help you. To the right, we've got a sound wall. That's Cedar Avenue, that's Highway 77. So we are literally running parallel to one freeway, and we're gonna bump up against another when we get up into the neighborhood. You see they got the dead end sign. It's a big cul-de-sac up here. And we will see, here's the sign, Grandview. We got that nice monument on either side, and we are now entering Grandview. So coming up on the right, as we get to the top of the hill, is 12128 Grandview. Most expensive home ever to sell in Napa Valley. Only home ever to sell for over $2 million, at least is recorded on the multiple listing service. Interestingly, it sold for $2 million in 1999. It was on the market last summer and actually sold for 1.8. So I'm going to point the camera at this house as we drive by. And here you go. On the other side of these trees is going to be 12128 Grandview. And I can't even give you the details of this house. I've actually never been inside of it, but I've seen the pictures, and I did go to high school with the owner of this home when those girls were in high school with me. I wasn't friends with them, but they had like a dance floor and a disco and a swimming pool. I think 6 garage stalls, maybe more. But that's Grandview. And I do have a story to tell you about. So again, not friends with the girls who lived in that house, but I delivered pizzas for Domino's, and you'd always be excited to deliver a pizza up to Grandview. So here's the story that happened to me at 12128 Grandview. Not owned by the same owners, but we had a tag on our Domino's name tag that said driver doesn't carry more than $20, which we didn't. As far as I know, and myself and all the other drivers, we're real careful about dumping our money into the little coffee cans, secure coffee cans, back at Domino's at the end of our shifts. So we really just carried change for a 20, but I had my own money on me. I didn't leave that at the store, so I had a duffel bag in my car that had my own personal cash on it. So one time I go up to 12128 Grandview, and the owner, I think the father of the girls that I knew, was washing his car in one of his 2 driveways, like cobblestone driveway. And I realized this later, or maybe I got suspicious later, but as I walked up, he glanced at my name tag and says, "Oh, hi Kevin, how much do I owe you?" So I know he'd been looking at my name tag, and whatever it was, I don't know, $14 or something. And then he says, "Well, I've only got a 50, do you have change?" And trying to be super accommodating, I thought about it. I'm like, yeah, if I take some money out of my own wallet, I can put together the change and get him his whatever $14 or $34 back from his $14 pizza. So I do that. I'm like, yeah, hold on a second, go back to my car, thinking, oh, I'm gonna get rewarded for going out of my way to give this guy change. And like, not that you expect super rich people to give you gigantic tips. He's not LeBron James or anything, but like, it was like, I think he gave me a tip, might not have given me a tip, but it was a really wimpy tip. And I kind of felt like he was trying to get one over on me to prove that I actually carried more change than $20, which I was just trying to be accommodating, kind of annoyed me. But anyway, that's a story about Grandview Estates. And this brings us to the end of our tour. Popping up on the screen right now are another couple tour videos that I would recommend you watch if you like this tour and you'd like to learn more about suburbs of the Twin Cities or the South Metro. I encourage you to click on one of these suggested videos. And again, if you have any questions about the Twin Cities relocating, buying, selling a home, feel free to reach out. My contact is below. But other than that, thanks very much for joining me on this tour of Western Napa Valley.